So a lot of people use it for that purpose, to really
Right.
connect with themselves, be present, let everything else go. In scenes that are maybe more challenging, where you're pushing boundaries, people can have a real sense of pride or accomplishment in themselves, whether they went through something physically really, really challenging. And sort of like, if you do a really challenging physical activity, while you're doing it, you might not really like it, but when you're done, it feels great. And you might not love it in the moment, or you may love it in the moment, but when you're done, you're like, wow, I accomplished this. So it's the same in BDSM. If you're forced to do something really physically challenging, when you're done, you're like, wow, I was able to do it. And the same is true for something that could be mentally really challenging. Putting yourself in really uncomfortable mental situations that are safe, sane, and you can stop anytime you want. You know that you are actually controlling, but you're challenging yourself. It gives you a better capacity, I think, to be able to handle regular life stresses. And I get that from my clients too.
Natalie, welcome to Inner Power Insight. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Totally my pleasure.
You are a professional luxury dominatrix, and I wanted to start with can you share a journey into becoming a professional dominatrix and what inspired to pursue this journey?
So I think my story may be a little different than a lot of people, especially those getting into it in the past 10 years or 15 years, where there's a little bit more information about this as a career. I started in 1993. So this was a world before the internet, before social media, before any of that. So it was very, very different. And I, at 18 years old, didn't even understand that this was a career. So I fell into it. It was totally and completely by accident. I was in college. It was my first semester. I was in college upstate New York, and I loved always hanging out in the city. So I would come home on the weekends, and I was just heading from Queens into Manhattan, and I bumped into a friend on the railroad, and hadn't seen her since probably junior year because she had dropped out of high school. She was like, "Hey, you want to hang out? I'm going to work, but we can hang out." And I was like, "Sure." I'm 18. You don't think to ask like what you do for work. You just want to hang out with an old friend. And so we just get off the train, and we're in the West Village, and we start hanging out in this brownstone. And like, it didn't even occur to me to like ask her what kind of work this was, because obviously it didn't seem much like a job, but I didn't care. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff started happening, and all these people came down from the upper floors of the brownstone. And I asked my friend, I was like, "What do you do?" I was like, "What is your job?" And she's like, "Oh, this is a role play house." And I had no idea what the hell she was talking about. But like, obviously being someone who's very much into sort of the New York counterculture at the time, I had a sense of what it was. So I just kind of sat there with my jaw in my lap, like, "Ooh, what is this? This is naughty." And so that was my first introduction to sort of, at that point, it was a little bit less than a house of domination. They did do more role play than traditional BDSM. And so that was sort of this just introduction. And I was fascinated. I was just like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. And so I just started hanging out. And the hanging out turned into kind of getting roped into my first session. I was really shy. I had never had a boyfriend at that point in my life. I did not see myself as being able to kind of do this sort of job. But my friend was really kind of pushing me to kind of join in on the sessions. And the woman who ran the house, she was just like very much wanting me to work for her, because most of the women back then, not to sound disparaging, but like they were older, probably in their mid 40s, not, really well put together, lots of drug use, lots of like not choosing that sort of a career, more of career of necessity. So here I was, 18 years old, fresh faced, I'm sure the woman saw just dollar signs kind of thing. And but I was really kind of fascinated, and I just took the plunge, and here we are 31 years later, still doing the same thing. So it was totally by accident. I mean, and I just fell in love with it.
That is so amazing because it's accident, and like you said, you were shocked. But what I love about your work, that what you do, you turn that to such an amazing business that is very sophisticated, very important to you, and you changed the whole thing around. Even though you started, like I said, back in the days, it was not a big deal, but you took that to the next level now, semi year. Um, but is this had to do something with you from young childhood? Because I know that you, when you were young, you did struggle with the weight and things like that. And a lot of people, when they do read about you, they might assume that, oh, maybe that's why she went. So I'm glad that you said no, it wasn't that, but it was just an accident. But it had anything to do with it?
So it was really interesting. I think, and probably one of the reasons that my concept of like my career is different than some other people who started back in the 90s. Um, a lot of people who got into the industry back then, again, it was a career not of choice, but of necessity.
Right.
And that led to a lot of sort of negativity around the people who provided this sort of service. And for me, it was very different. I had options, I had choices. I was in school, but because of my natural curiosity about it, when I got into it, it did really actually help me because I was so overweight growing up. I was 240 pounds when I was only 13. I was made fun of. And actually, I hadn't, like I said, had even a boyfriend at the time that I started doing this because I had lost some weight. I'd lost a good amount of weight, but I was still, heavier than I am now, but hadn't had the opportunity to really find anybody to really date. Um, and so for me, shy, introverted, not at all secure in my sexuality, not at all secure in myself as a person, being thrown into this job where it was sort of fake it till you make it. I did love acting. When I was I thought I was going to go to school for acting. That was what I thought I would major in college. Didn't wind up majoring in it, but did start out on that path, taking acting classes in college. And so for me, it was sort of like this way to act. But as I kind of got into the industry and I realized here are these people who I kind of respected. They were older than me. In my perception of my clients, they were well established. They had good careers. They were typically people who were very well put together, especially an 18-year-old looking at them. And back in the day, it was sort of this lineup, not the best, but you go and you meet the guy and you leave, and it was yeah. And they would choose you, and they would obviously pay to have you have the session. And in my brain, I was like, these people don't know me. They don't have to like me. They're actually choosing on their own to session with me and play with me in scene. They see this quality in me where I'm able to dominate them, and it blew my mind because I was like, me, so insecure. I was like, and so it kind of helped me, I think, get to a place of self acceptance and confidence way quicker than maybe if I hadn't been in that career, because I had these complete strangers sort of choosing me and wanting to see me in this position of power or controlling the scene in some fetish way. And I couldn't believe it. I was so much younger. I was completely inexperienced, but it was like, oh, wow. So in those hours or 2 hours or whatever, like I put forward the person I thought I could be or wanted to be, this sexy, intelligent, in charge woman. And I think after doing that for a while and seeing it kind of bleeds over into the rest of my life a lot quicker than maybe if I was kind of left to my own devices.
I was just gonna say, what a way to jump in right away from going to that and that. And let's bring the point of the confidence, like you said, that even if this wasn't the choice that you had to make and put in into kind of, you probably still struggle with your confidence. And over there, you kind of like relaxed and you're like, you know what? I don't care. this is who I am, and these people are coming in and paying. And I started as in like, okay, I'm just gonna act. But then you realize, wait a minute, that's me, and I can be that, and I am beautiful, and I am smart, and I am sexy, and these people are finding me attractive in order to do session with them, and that kind of just changes because a lot of people they have to go through something in order to realize that. For
Yeah.
you, it's just like fast forward crash course. Hey, listen, not having a boyfriend now, you this amazing person out here, controlling the whole situation, and that takes a lot of courage, and that takes a lot of um, switching your mind and mindset and all that.
And it did. I mean, it took a long time for what I did at work to translate into my personal life, for sure. And it was still a long journey
Yeah.
to really feel that way when I wasn't in scene. Even today, those insecurities from childhood still completely pop up, all of these years later. They never really, really go away. But I will say that having my career helped substantially and me be a more confident, self-assured person. And also, I always sort of chose a different path when I was younger because I knew I was never going to fit in. I was always made fun of, so I decided very early on, like, I'm not going to fit in. I'm never going to be the pretty girl. I'm never going to be the cheerleader. I'm never going to be the one everyone wants to be friends with because I was so overweight. So I kind of decided to say, F all of you, I'm going the completely opposite direction. So I was very attracted to things that were different. And
Mm.
I think that that sort of also propelled me going forward. And with my career and being so accepted by my clients, it gave me that confidence to be okay with accepting being different.
Amen to that. And number one, that is kind of blessing for people that are listening right now and they feeling the way you used to felt like I'm not good enough or I'm not going to be that cheerleader and I'm not going to and fuck all of this. I'm just going to do my own thing. That should be everybody's attitude. Don't
Should.
care how you look like, what care, whatever. But unfortunately, that's not the case. But I'm glad that see if you agree with me, is coming back now. A lot of people are speaking about it. A lot of people are coming out and being successful. And this is why especially in my podcast, we're talking about it that it's not so bad. If you feel that we actually give you more courage to go out there with not giving a fuck. And we're bringing that back. We're teaching people not to, pay attention to yourself, be yourself, do things that you wanted to do. So in a way, it's a trend, but you did it then. And it's now it's like, that's okay to be you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I've done a lot in my years as a dom, but I also got my life coaching certification. And the one thing that I really kind of took from that is I wish there was a way to teach more young people how to figure out what they want and not do what they think that they're supposed to do to be happy. Because I know so many people from my coaching business and my dom business that like they have all the things that you're supposed to have in life that are supposed to make you happy, but they're pretty miserable. And it's because they just did what they thought that they were supposed to do. And they were never taught to actually figure out what they wanted, what they thought would make them happy. And granted, we don't always know until we're there, but we're really not given the opportunity to choose a lot of times. Whether it's through parents, whether it's through your social setting, through TV, media, we are kind of pushed in a particular direction to have a certain kind of life, career, children, family, this, that, the other thing, in a certain kind of structure based on how we grew up. And a lot of times that's not really what we want. And we're really not happy completely because we just do what we think everyone else tells us are going to make us happy. So for the people who go against that a little bit or question it at least and look more into, hey, I'm going to try these things out. Does this feel right for me? Is this really the path that I want to take? And I found that if you do like what makes you happy in life, you will be happy regardless of, how much money you have or where you're living or what your apartment looks like. Like you will be happy if you're content with your life that fits you. It's very
Absolutely.
individual.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that one. It's very important to do that. self-acceptance. That's really what it is. And at the end of the day, you have to accept yourself of who you are, and you will figure it out and you'll succeed. But the goal is to get happy. And some of us that, like I myself, mine was more cultural, that I was pushing to do what I have to do because of the culture and where I come from. But in the end of the day, everyone wants happiness. It just takes a little time to carve that and find out who you are and what you want. Some people find it faster than others. But listening to this and listening to you, wherever you are, just know that this is very important to know who you are and what you want, and just at least be curious about it. You don't even have to do it, just curiosity. Curiosity can give you indication of who you are, and slowly you're going to learn about yourself.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. For those that are unfamiliar with BDSM, can you tell us exactly what that is?
Sure. It stands for bondage, discipline, sadomasochism, dominance, submission.
Okay.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. I was
Lots of
gonna
words.
say,
Lots of words.
I wasn't gonna pronounce that or dare to say it.
But it also encompasses a lot. It is a phrase that is used, and it can mean an infinity of possibilities of things. But the basic tenets of people who practice BDSM is that there's generally some sort of power exchange happening. Um, and also, it's a platform to explore things like fetishes and non traditional forms of sexuality and interests. But the way that that can come together, it could be a million different things, just like the words.
Yes.
There's so much going on to unpack. We can spend 3 hours just talking about what it means.
Right. And especially it depending on who is coming from and
Yeah.
how you're doing your research and doing that. So, what are some keys, principle that or practices for BDSM that people can apply to ensure communication and trust in their everyday relationship?
Yeah. So the big thing about BDSM practices are, again, you mentioned trust and communication. So if you enter into any kind of BDSM dynamic, relationship, playtime scene, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to establish sort of what the person's boundaries are going to be, what their interests are, and what their boundaries are. And that is key, that everything in BDSM is safe, sane, consensual. And you need to have a lot of communication before you start this sort of a relationship or scene, because you can't assume anything. And with a lot of communication and boundary settings is going to be trust. So if you can't trust the person to be able to respect the boundaries or listen to the communication, then it's not going to work. And that's why BDSM relationships and playtime can can really reflect things that people should have in their regular relationships, even if they're completely vanilla. But unfortunately, we don't go into vanilla relationships with these sort of rules of like, okay, we're starting a relationship. Let's make sure we have good communication. Let's make sure we're telling each other boundaries. Let's make sure we're respecting each other's boundaries. Let's make sure we know how to communicate effectively, and let's check in. Like most people, you just don't do that in other kinds of relationship, whether they're sexual or personal. We just kind of go through life and we have these relationships, and that's why there's a lot of issues. It takes a lot of work to be able to have this sort of level of communication. But when you know that you're going to be entering into a situation where boundaries need to come into play, and where people are going to be exploring things that maybe they're uncomfortable with, or maybe there's actual physical safety issues, you have to start this way. So we don't really think about that in vanilla relationships, but it is the first thing you think about in any kind of ethical BDSM play. So I think more people should have this sort of a skill set and apply it to any kind of relationship that they're entering into.
I was gonna say, that's a great point that you just made, because in any relationship we should have trust and boundary and communication. But as you said, that it's just so common for us to just go in, and sometimes you end up in an abusive relationship. Sometimes people go through a lot of stuff that that they think is normal. And it's like, okay, especially like you said, if you're going to a new relationship. So I myself was like, my marriage was arranged, and I met my husband the day that we, got married, and that's when we did whatever. So that itself, to go through some experience like that, to get that knowledge, to have that principle with every area of your life, like you said, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's friendship, whatever it is, it's very important to communicate, trust, and have a boundaries, which people don't have that. So this is, to me, it's like you should try it just for that.
Yeah. And it helps to give you that skill set of how to navigate that. Now, with that said, trust me, I've had personal relationships and other relationships where I was not nearly as effective at communicating my boundaries and all that. Because it's interesting, when you know that BDSM is sort of structured on this, it's a lot easier to do it. But we're not taught that our personal relationships are structured like this.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes, even as someone who has the skill set, challenging to make that work in other dynamics. That's the
Right.
great thing about BDSM is people who are coming to it, they understand that this is the framework. This is what we are supposed to do. So it makes it a lot easier.
A lot easier.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. So what advice would you give to someone who curious about it to explore? And what are some safety and respectfully the way they have to do it,
Yeah.
either in the location or with their partner?
Yeah, so if people want to try this at home, it's great. But again, understand that the level of communication needs to be probably potentially more than they would normally have. So they need to talk about it, and they need to talk about it in a way that's not going to be judgmental. If you
Okay.
want to kind of come to this, you have to have a certain level of understanding that people may bring things to you that may be a little bit different or strange, and you have to try and be really non-judgmental, and also set boundaries for when things might not be what you want. And you might not know. That's the tricky thing. When you start, you're like, hey, I want to try this, and you do it and you really don't like it, but you didn't know that something you did was a boundary. So not only do you have to have clear communication beforehand, you have to kind of talk about what happened so you can understand, is what we did okay? What was good? What was bad? If boundaries were crossed, be like, oh, I wanted to try that. That was way too much. I don't want to do that again. I did not like the way that felt. So
Hmm.
even though you have an idea, you might like it. When you actually practice it, you might not. And you
Right.
have to be okay with communicating that, and also understanding that you're the person that asked for this. So if you realize a boundary is crossed, you yourself have to be prepared to be pushed and have it not go well, because that does
Right.
happen. And so there has to be a lot of trust, because you have to then trust that the person did this to the best of their ability, not to hurt you, not to push a boundary, but that you discovered something about yourself. So it means there has to be a lot of trust there, and open communication,
Right.
and respecting of boundaries.
Right.
And also, some of the things that people might want to explore can be dangerous, not just physically dangerous. That is definitely a part of it. If you do bondage, there's many things that can go wrong, any sort of play with the body, using things. But also, it can be dangerous mentally if you are tackling subjects that you have shame around, that have been told have been wrong in the past. So when you're going and you're playing in this way, understanding that the areas that can come up can be dangerous, if you don't have the skill set, if you don't think your partner has the skill set, then you should really do a lot of research, and try and find classes, lessons, things that are available online. And there is a ton out there. There's a 7 Days of Domination, which is one of the best series out there. I am always astounded at the level of information and effort that is put into the series. And it is just a plethora. And you can go in and look and learn, and really get some information. And there's plenty of books now, and a lot of people who are really qualified in this industry who are putting out information. So you should research it. And if you feel that you want more hands-on training, you might want to ask people for lessons, or seek out a professional before you do anything. There's tons of people who do bondage lessons, rope
Or
lessons.
lesson.
You can understand like what on the body works and what could potentially put you in a dangerous situation, what safety tools to have, how to communicate things, and how to do things appropriately.
You're very big on that. And the reason for that is you started your own business. You have your own business. You have your own place in New York City that we're going to mention later. So it is the process, if somebody's unfamiliar with it and their curiosity is like, okay, I want to do it. It sounds good because I do want to build up that relationship, that communication and that boundary and my relationship as well as want to have some fun. um is there like something that you start with small to just introduce them, or if they come in and I say, okay, I'm ready and I'm gonna go full fledged, and you're like, no, hold up, that's
Yeah,
not how it
for
works.
sure, for sure. So when people come to me, obviously they can come to me as a single person or as a couple or whatever the situation is. More often than not, it is one individual person. So it's a one-on-one dynamic.
Right.
In that dynamic, if they're new, there's a whole questionnaire process. There's a phone consultation process. There's a really diving into where their interests are, what their curiosities are. And most people are like, you do what you think is appropriate to start. And based on the
Right.
information that I get from them, I'll do what I think is appropriate. Sometimes people come in, and because so much information is available and you see these videos and you see all this stuff and all this, they get very excited and they want it like everything in the kitchen sink like right away. And I explained to them, I'm like, all of these things are great and fine and wonderful, but this isn't where we start. Because a lot of these things take not only you being able to truly trust me, but me being able to trust and know you. Because you can't express to me what your limits are. You don't have experience yet. So I can't do X, Y, and Z until we start at A, B, and C. So I can see your tolerance and the way you process these things. So if you want to jump into the deep end, things can go sideways. And I'm not the person that is going to start there, because you can have a bad experience, get turned off to it, and then just never practice it again. So it's way better to start here and let us figure these things out first. Once I start to get to know you a little bit, you start to get to know me, then we build on that and the trust builds and I could push more. But there's no way we're jumping in over here. And that's my approach. And it
Well,
might mean that they don't want to see me because I'm telling them I'm not going to give them, what they want, which is fine. I don't care about that. I need to make sure that the process is going to be a safe one.
yeah, and also like you said, turning off the some people coming in, and if you're in with somebody in the wrong hand, that could be very traumatized, and like you said, they're first timers and they come in, they have bad experience, and then that's all they're gonna remember. So it's very important to do your research and who you're going with.
Yeah, and even if they've done it before, I've had some people come in and they're like, "Oh, I've had these couple of scenes and they really didn't push me enough. I really need more. I really need more." So, I was like, "Okay, I understand that. I have the experiences. You're saying you want this, and as long as I don't think it's anything physically dangerous, I tried." And the person had to say their safe word, and they're like, "I know I asked for it. It was way too overwhelming. I thought it's what I wanted. It's not what I wanted. We have to back up." But it was interesting because, then we had several scenes after that and we kind of figured out that nice middle ground. But the important thing was they stuck with me instead of just going to the next person, because I now had that information of what was too much.
Right.
So I could like use that. And it's important, to be able to build a bit of a relationship with somebody. I think personally it's better. Some people love the newness of it, and if you are the kind of person where you're not really pushing boundaries, like say you have a fetish where things are not really being pushed and you're not sort of exploring uncharted territories, then it's great. You could see a different person every time because the newness is exciting to you. And in that circumstance, it could be wonderful. But if you're really trying to get into areas where you're exploring unknown things about yourself, trying to push your boundaries, it's better if you have some sort of relationship with the person.
For the person to feel safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that definitely. So what is the biggest misconception when it comes to your career?
There's a lot. I would say probably the first one is that not just myself, but the people that come to see me, that there's something wrong with them, you know, and that has been luckily been proven that, this is no longer considered a disorder, a mental disorder like it used to be. That people who practice BDSM, not only are they very healthy mentally, that a lot of the studies have shown that they're actually more well adapted because they have better communication, they're more creative, they have a stress outlet, they have a lot of positive things because of their practice. So that's a big misconception, that people who do this are weird or strange or there's something wrong with their brain. It's just not true.
That's not true.
Um, Also, I would say that one of the other big things, that it's all about pain. BDSM can have absolutely nothing to do with physical pain or mental pain. It is a huge misconception. It can be about power exchange. It could be about fetishes, role play. We call it play for a reason. So the fact that there has to be pain involved in BDSM is not true whatsoever. I would say also that the sort of dynamic is all about what the Dom wants. And that's definitely not true, especially in, I think, more professional situations. It's really about what the sub's needs are and what the sub's boundaries are, and respecting those.
Mhm.
So even though conceptually, you're the person in charge, you are the person who is sort of orchestrating what's going on. It really is oftentimes not about only the Dom's needs and or wants. Um, so yeah, I would say those are some. Oh, some people, think that it's like abusive in some way, mentally abusive or physically abusive. That is obviously not the case. Again, safe, sane, and consensual. While the acts may look like abuse, if you randomly see an image of a BDSM scene, you may think that's abusive. It looks like that to me. Sometimes I'll be scrolling on Twitter and you get 6 seconds of someone being aggressively kneed in the nuts or something. And like, first thing in the morning, you're like, oh God, this is too much because it looked like abuse. But you're not seeing the context, you're not understanding what's going on, you're not seeing the before, you're not seeing the after, you're not understanding what's going on between the two people. So out of context, BDSM can look extraordinarily abusive, but if it is done appropriately, it's not.
Just like everything else, right?
Mhm.
Beyond fulfilling their sexuality desires, so what the client really typically gain from the session?
I'm sorry, what was the first part of the?
That beyond the sexual fantasy, and like you
Okay,
said, because
so
it's part of it. It's part of it, right? The
yeah.
sexual fantasy and the thing. And so, what other thing they typically gain from it, from the one session? And we said that, okay, boundary and communication and trust, that's all good. But is there something that they actually tell you that this is why I do?
Yeah, I mean, for everybody, it's different. For some people, it's just sheer enjoyment, whether it's sexual enjoyment or just fun. People, it's like, role play for adults. And, so we get to be a kid. We get to just have fun in what we're doing. So there's just this sometimes enjoyment of the interaction, very playful, very fun, especially if it's like a fetish or something. A lot of people in scenes where maybe they are being challenged and they are pushing boundaries, is there's a level of self-exploration, self-discovery, and through that, oftentimes self-acceptance,
Mm.
which are huge. If doing this makes you feel better about who you are and know yourself better, it's a wonderful opportunity for growth and self-acceptance. For some people, it's a break. It's like a vacation. I've heard that said, I don't even know how many times by my subs, that their time playing with me is like a mini vacation. Everything is left at the door. And when they are in scene, nothing else matters. They are present, they are focused. They're not looking at their phone, they're not worried about work. They are kind of forced into a situation where they have to be there and in the moment, which We are not in our world. We're thinking about what just happened, what's about to happen. Humans are not, I mean, that's like yoga. We're kind of trying so hard to be present in the
Yeah.
moment. And in a scene, it really forces that being present with yourself, with what's going on, you know, paying attention to how you feel, what you're feeling, all of that, is really important. So a lot of people use it for that purpose, to really
Right.
connect with themselves, be present, let everything else go. In scenes that are maybe more challenging, where you're pushing boundaries, um, people can have a real sense of pride or accomplishment in themselves, whether they went through something physically really, really challenging, and sort of like if you do a really challenging physical activity, while you're doing it, you might not really like it, but when you're done, it feels great. It's sort of like, you're going and you're doing a half mile, or, a half marathon, or you're going to do some kind of obstacle course race. You're doing something really hard at the gym, and you might not love it in the moment, or you may love it in the moment, but when you're done, you're like, wow, I accomplished this. I was physically capable of accomplishing this. So it's the same in BDSM. If you're forced to do something really physically challenging, when you're done, you're like, wow, I was able to do it. And the same is true for something that could be mentally really challenging. Putting yourself in really uncomfortable mental situations that are safe, sane, and you can stop anytime you want. It's not like life forcing you into these really uncomfortable mental situations, but this is a situation that you could stop, that you are actually controlling, but you're challenging yourself. It gives you a better capacity, I think, to be able to handle regular life stresses. And I get that from my clients too, like that their ability to be challenged grows.
I love that you said that the challenging that I accomplished something, and as unfamiliar as sounds to a lot of people, to put yourself in that position and say like, you know what, I actually did it, and I'm okay. So I think that's also a very important lesson for people to learn from this, that mentally we have to challenge ourselves in any situation, especially this thing that is, like you said, is safe and they can stop anytime they want, and they're with a professional that they have full control
Yeah.
to do. So definitely a point that I did not know, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are like, then it just definitely, if you look at it that in that way, it makes a lot of sense that they do that.
And also,
So
like, some people, you know, when you do something for somebody and it feels really good, you get them a great present, or you're able to help them in some way, and you feel good about yourself. And I think all that plays a lot into the DS relationship, where the sub is feeling they are making the dom happy, that they did something good for somebody else. And it also taps into that part of ourself. And again, in that situation, it's something that they're able to do, because sometimes we want to do things for people that we can't do, and we feel bad about that. But in this situation, you're setting up the dynamic so you could do something for somebody, but you could do it, so it sort of sets you up to always succeed and have that good feeling of like, I was able to do this for somebody else. I feel really good. Being charitable in some way, shape, or form makes us feel good about ourselves. So
yeah,
that is
yeah.
that dynamic.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how can you tell the difference between somebody's coming in and really want to enjoy themselves and learn all that stuff and it's great, than someone that is like a little bit off that, and then you are the one that making the decision that no, you need a professional help and this is not for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, generally, that'll hopefully happen before we even meet in person, because I do have a pretty rigorous process. But sometimes you realize it after getting to know the person. And yeah, you just have to take a hard line, not just for them, but for yourself. Because if they are looking to you to fix them in a way that is beyond the scope of practice, you have to be, adult enough and understand, like, I can't help this person. This is not my job. I'm not trained to do this. I'm not a professional. It could be dangerous for me. It could be dangerous for them. So you need to communicate, that I feel, you're coming to me to get something that I cannot help you with. You're searching out some sort of help that I can't give you.
You verbally say that to them.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if it's a situation where they want to come back and see you, I've said that to people, because I have felt like they need me to be their therapist, and I'm like, you, I can't be your therapist. I can listen. I can give you some advice, especially after you know each other a really long time. I could be your therapist friend, like we all have. I could definitely be that because I'm very friendly with my subs, especially some of them I've seen for 20 years. But if somebody seems to be in a depression, a depressive state, if somebody has, paranoia, if somebody has other issues that I'm like, whoa, this is way beyond anything I could ever fix and they need help, then it's the same thing in like my coaching business. Like I have to understand I'm a life coach. I am not certified to be a nutritionist. I am not certified to give them diet plans. I am certified to give them workout programs, but I have my personal training certification. So you have to know sort of what you're capable of, and really, if somebody needs help, if you don't think the person's going to receive what you're seeing very well and that it might be a danger to you, then obviously you would navigate the situation differently
Mm.
because you don't want to put yourself in a dangerous situation either. But obviously also sometimes just ghosting someone isn't appropriate. So you would have to take it case by case. But yeah, um, generally, if you know the person already, and maybe this is something that's come up later in life where you see things are getting a little bit um, too intense for them in their life, you might suggest that they need some other help. Or like I said, I've seen people right off the bat, and they're like, they come to me because I have kinky coaching, so they sort of assume it's more like therapy. And I've had to tell a lot of people right in the consultation, I was like, you need a professional therapist. This is I coach. This is not what I do. Very, very, very simple because maybe they don't know that that's really what they need, you know?
All right. You work with your clients very closely, obviously. The is there a case that they have got emotionally attached with you, or you got emotionally attached with them?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So I sometimes look at my peers who are younger than me, who've been doing this 5 years, maybe 7 years, 10 years, whatever. And because there's been so much information on how to be a Dom and how to do this, it's much more like a business. I did this when I was 18, been doing 30. There was no tutorial or manual. No, I'm like, so the boundary setting was not the best when like, oh, this is my job, because you do get to know people. You really, really do. And I have to say, some of my subs are also my best friends. Like we have great personal relationships at this point, as well as professional relationships. And I'm so grateful for them. And in a way, it's like the best thing ever, but it does make life a little bit challenging because now you have a lot of obligation to quite a few people and you have a lot of important relationships that it's like you have to maintain. There's a certain expectation of that. So yeah, there definitely can be boundary crossing. I have had it go both ways where subs of mine have told me that they have gotten too emotionally connected and they can't continue to see me because they understand what they want out of the relationship will never be.
Mhm.
So I've been unable to see them again. And oftentimes, I mean, it's heartbreaking because someone 10 years and you've been through a lot of things with them. I mean, it's devastating on my end. I have lost a few people over the years and I'm so happy for them because they've moved on to like better things, and obviously staying with our relationship was hindering that for whatever reason. Either they weren't pursuing other things because they had these hopes that we can be more, or they started to pursue something and because of that they felt that it wasn't appropriate to continue our relationship anymore. So while I'm super happy that they've moved on and I was a great part of their life for a while, it's very sad to see them go.
Mhm.
At other times I've had to take that sort of hard line and let people kind of go out of the relationship because their expectations of what it was more than I could give. And, obviously, despite trying to communicate the boundaries, I could tell that they just were never going to be happy with the boundaries and what I was able to give in the relationship, and just had to take the hard line and be like, look, I'm sorry, I'm never going to be able to give you what you want, and you're always going to continually be disappointed. So I think it's best for us to not see each other anymore.
Aw,
Yeah, it's sad.
yeah.
It is sad. Sometimes it's not sad because sometimes you're actually angry with them because you've been very clear from the beginning what the boundaries are, and they want more, they want more, they want more. And, you kind of like are like, I'm done. It's like any relationship, like you want so much from me that I cannot give you. So sometimes it's
Mm.
sad and sometimes you're fucking pissed. And you're like, I want to poke you in the eyes right now because you just
Yeah.
listen to boundaries. So yeah.
But the level of vulnerability itself is so fascinating, right? Because when they come to you, they show a lot of vulnerability,
Mhm.
which, like you said, is imaginative, is their safe place. They forget about the world, and that's their own little world. So I think that itself can be very
Very
sensitive.
bonding.
Yeah, and sensitive. Yeah. So and we as a human tend to be more attractive to people, and we fall in love that when we feel our vulnerability,
Yep.
when we can show that, that is so beautiful, because a lot of us hold that back for the longest time, despite what, even in a regular relationship. I've seen people been married for 15, 20 years and they're not able to show that vulnerability because.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I've had yeah, some of my relationships are literally over 20 years at this point, 22 years, 25 years. And in those, I constantly get told that I know them better than anybody else in their life, better than
I
their
believe that.
therapist, better than their wife if they have one, better than their best friend, their brother, because we started from a place where we were touching their most vulnerable parts, and then it just grew over decades. So yeah, I mean, there is love there, without a doubt, both ways,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm imagining it as you speaking. I'm imagining it. I'm going through the stories, and it's so beautiful to walk into a place knowing that you're completely and utterly can be yourself.
100%. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that just feels so good, right? Because it's just like there's no judging, there's no picking on me and on telling me I'm good or I'm not good. They just take me as I am, and I'm having a great time. So
Honestly, my DS relationships that I've had with people that I've met through my work, that I have become very good friends with, are the best relationships that
I
I've
believe
had.
that.
Like better than most of my ex, my first marriage, other relationships, other personal relationships I've had. They are stronger, they are more real and honest, and people find that really hard because there's this financial component to it. But honestly, knowing somebody on that level, and also them knowing me and accepting me for this part of myself, um, you know, it's crazy to admit, but yeah, there's some of my best relationships for sure.
Yeah. We don't do that in real life. And it just,
No,
I'm
we don't.
sorry. No, we don't do that. We just like always have either some type of agenda, or we just like not revealing ourselves to the 100%. And that's what causes a lot of chaos and a lot of problem when it comes to the relationship. So that's one way to look at it. Now you said that you use safety word when you do things.
Yeah.
Um, do you come up with a safety word, you give it to them, or they come up, and if they can speak, so how is the body language that you watch for?
So I generally give a safe word unless somebody's been playing for a long time and they have certain words that are very natural to them already. I will totally to default to what their words are. Some people like more than a safety word. Some people like a green, red, yellow sort of dynamic, when they're playing. So you can have more cues than just, I need this to stop. But I generally give the person the safety word. And I also tell them, if you can't speak, if you're gagged and you're unable to speak, uh, snap your fingers, tap your hand, that will get my attention. Now, say you're in a body bag and your arms are like this and you're heavily gagged.
Right.
Like, what do you do? What do you do then? So generally, I tell the person to either start to hum like "Happy Birthday" or do some short, sharp grunts like and
Yeah.
obviously, I will start to undo things so I can
Right. Right.
see what is going on. So yeah, I mean, there's multiple levels of being able to communicate. And I also really want to impress on people, especially when I first start seeing them. Using your safety word is something that will never ever disappoint me. The only way I will be disappointed is if you don't use it, because some people think that they're going to disappoint you or that they have to sort of power through it. And it's like, that is such a misconception, because I need to be able to trust you to communicate to me when things are too much. And, when people don't, things can go wrong. So it's never bad to use a safe word. It's always really great to be able to have that trust that you're going to communicate to me when you need to as well, and not be scared of disappointment or whatever.
And it's you have to be like so sharp and alert while you're doing this as well. It's
Yeah,
almost
even
like
if the person can't talk to you or see you or can't move, like, you have to be honed in, breathing, watching, making sure all of a sudden, are they fidgeting? Why are they fidgeting? Is something pinching? Is something going on inside? You know what I mean? Like, are they losing circulation somewhere? Like, and this is all subtle energy, body language that you're trying to pick up on all the time.
yeah, because you have to be so alert and you're watching. It's almost like you're multitasking. You're doing your job as well as you're observing everything, making sure everything goes smooth, especially if it's somebody new and they're not using their safe word, and you're like, oh, great.
Yep. Always have to be hyper aware, hyper aware.
Oh, that's so funny. Now, before I let you go, my last question to you is, what does inner power means to you?
I would say avoiding the fear of the unknown. I think that we as people are so scared of what we don't know that the fear of going into a situation is always worse than the actual situation is going to be, because our minds make it so much worse. So if you have the ability to tamper down that fear of what you don't know and just go for it, that's real inner power. I don't know, I can't do it a lot. So I try. I try.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Because my saying always is, and I love that you said that. My saying always is that love dances on the unknown.
Yeah, definitely.
It definitely is, because we're so afraid of the unknown, but a lot of good things happen when you are in the unknown. And that's what we call it, magic or miracle or bliss or things like that. But it does really happen when you say you trust the universe, you trust yourself, and you trust whoever created you, however you got here. And that's the most beautiful thing that people can do. So,
It is.
but first and foremost, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
This is so much fun. I learned so much, and I'm sure a lot of listeners learned a lot as well, whether they're already doing it or thinking about doing it or just out of curiosity of what it is. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for explaining it so amazingly and easily to us for us to understand.
I am so glad that I can impart a little bit of information and knowledge. Hopefully, some people out there, whether they want to try this or not, have learned a little something and to take away a few nuggets of interesting information.
Thank you.
Thank you.